Thanks. Just a little bit of background. So I've been at Veritas for 8 years. I was there the first day we ever had football. And when I say we had football, that's a very relative term. I mean, we had kids that put on pads that had seen a football before. I remember my first day of practice. Our head football coach was Joe Schieffer at the time, and he was the AD. And he actually played football at Air Force. And after the first practice, we had our practice meeting, and I remember his question was, "Okay, guys, what do we need to work on?" And I looked at him and was like, "Coach, I don't think there is anything we can do to turn these boys into football by next week." And that was our first game. So we had 1 week of practice, and then it was game week. It's just the way it worked out for us. Our kids did not know what it was like to be committed to a program. They didn't know what it was like to be committed to showing up to practice on a regular basis. And so it was rough. I mean, it was real rough. First off, we only had 8.5 kids total. I say 8.5 because we had one that showed up and he wanted to be the quarterback. And if he was asked to do anything else on that football team, he was not playing. He said, "I'm done." Fortunately, he could actually throw the ball decent until he got hit, and then he was done for the season after, I think, week 1, because he's like, "Ow, this hurts. I got a bruise." So that's where we started 8 years ago. And in the course of those 8 years, we just started improving. And then I was always the defensive coordinator until 2 years ago, and that's when I took over as the head football coach. But we'd always had a really selfish team. And when we always had a bunch of kids out for themselves and coming out about their own personal accomplishments. We didn't have any true football players. I mean, all of our players were good athletes. I mean, we really did. We had a bunch of good athletes, and we still do. But no real football players. And so it was all about what they could accomplish on their own. We had kids coming out to play football just so that they could put on a college resume, all that kind of stuff. So it made practice pretty difficult because in football, the only way you're going to accomplish anything is self-sacrifice. You've got to put your team above yourself. And so 2 years ago, that's the challenge I put out to our team. I said, "Okay, listen, you want to play for me? I'm the head football coach now. We're changing the culture. You've got to sacrifice yourself. If I ask you to block, you have to block. If I ask you to play defense when you don't want to, you have to do it. You have to give everything you have." And so it started to change the culture. And the proof of that is we once stayed our first year behind Harrison Snow, who was a dynamic athlete. I mean, he was a good spread back. He could throw the ball. He could run the ball. Guess what? We put him on the offensive line. We asked him to block about 80% of the time. And he did it. And he sacrificed himself and his own personal accomplishments so that the team could be better. And then we did the same thing this year. We had 2 great running backs. And either one of them could have had probably 3,000 yards if we would have really wanted to push them that hard. Instead, they split carries with each other so that they could both play defense so that we could be better on both sides of the ball. And so that's kind of the background story. Now, the defense that I'm going to go over, it's a spread passing defense. Just because this is something that we spent all year last year preparing. I think the number one thing in 6-man football is concentrating on who do you have to beat to accomplish your goal. And so that when I knew we were going to move up from Division II to Division I, I went and set us a schedule that was really difficult. I went and found the best competition I could find, knowing we were going to have to go through Emory eventually. Like, from week 1, we knew that was the goal. I mean, they have 400 kids in their high school. We're good about 160. And matter of fact, we played them in week 3, and then we played them again in the playoffs. And when we played them in week 3, they show up in 2 buses. They have we played their JV and their varsity. They have 37 kids walking off there, and we're like, "Yeah, we have 22. We're good." And so, but we knew going into the season that's who we were going to face. And so, as a coaching staff, we got together and we're like, "This is where we know we have to be by the end of the year." And so we have to plan for that week by week, and we implemented some defenses starting out. So what you're going to see here on all these slides and the video that I'm going to show you later is what we came to by the second round of the playoffs. So we played them in week 3, and we went into that game with 2 base defenses. We had a 3-2-1 and a 2-2-2, and that's it. I mean, and we had a bunch of guys playing out of position because we had, like I said, we had 22, 23 guys, and we played a JV and a varsity schedule. And so half of our guys played JV, half of us played varsity. By the end of the season, we were running 16 guys on our team that actually played and contributed to our team and to help us, especially when we're doing stuff like this, and you'll see why in just a minute. But we went in there with the goal, we're not going to show them anything that we're going to do later. And we knew, and I caught hell about this from some of my coaches, that this puts us at a strategic disadvantage in this game. Like, I knew going into it, it was going to be a tough game to win with the game plan we had. And we could have sacrificed everything, I think, because we were competitive anyway. We lost by 12 points, so it's not like they blew us out even in week 1. But we game planned for later, and then that was the whole purpose. And so that's how this began, and that's how this process began. And once we played them, we had them on film, we started breaking it down. Okay, now what is it actually going to take to beat these guys? By the time we played them, we had every game they played that year on film, completely broken down. I ran reports. They passed almost 80% of the time. They ran the slant out about 45% of the time. I mean, and so I ran all these reports and all this information. So I had all this information. And then when we went back and watched our film against them, you could see, based on what we did the play before, the coach was calling the play from the sideline. And they whipped us because they knew what we were going to do. And so we went into this game with a multi-formation defense to kind of confuse them and to confuse their quarterback, because that's what they did, that's what they wanted to do, and they were great at it. I mean, they had 2 dynamic receivers, they had a great quarterback and a great running back, and so they just went through their season getting better and improving and doing that kind of thing. And we kind of went through most of our season planning on, we know we're not going to get to where we go until we go through them. And so what does this look like? Go ahead, Coach. We run everything from a base 2-3-1. So what does that mean? We line up in a 2-3-1 set every single time. Okay? Again, if you go back and look at our film from the first time we played them, they knew exactly what we were in based on how we lined up, because we lined up in it and we gave it away. And so they were calling plays to hit us in the spots where we weren't going to be covering, and we gave it away by our alignment. So the second time when we played them, we lined up exactly the same time, at exactly the same place every single play. Okay? Now, obviously, they run a couple different sets, so it was the same way per every set that they had, but it was still a 2-3-1 defense. The only exception of that, I gave our middle linebacker a lot of freedom to move around, and you'll see some of that on film. I let him roam wherever he wanted to go, as long as he got to where he needed to be at the end of the play, just to add one more element of confusion to the system. And so our base 3-2-1, it has 2 tackles, strong and weak. It has 3 linebackers, Sam, Mike, and Will, and it has 1 safety. Okay? We actually switch sides, strong and weak, based on whatever the call was that week. And I couldn't find all my game notes, so I don't remember what it was. I think a lot of times it was where the back lined up. Because the back usually is offset behind him to one side or the other, and I think that's what we called our strength to. And we ignored everything else on the field. Mainly because that's, if they were going to run it, that's generally where they ran it from, and we saw that on film. So the strong side, the strong call always is going to differ by opponent. Again, on Emory, I think we called it to their number 8, their running back. And then we move guys around by position a lot based on what we saw on film. Okay? And so in different situations, by down, we knew, for example, on first and less than 10, if they ever had that inside the goal line, they ran it about 90% of the time. And so we put our best 2 or 3 guys up in the front to stop the run. On second and 15, I think they threw it like 98% of the time. And so we backed off and we had no guys in coverage. And so we moved guys around a lot based on what their situations were. And that was just moving positions around and putting in different personnel. In our spread defense, the Sam and Will are more like cornerbacks, and our Mike is more like a roaming safety. And again, I told you, we let our middle linebacker move around a lot. Sometimes he'll be up on the line of scrimmage. Sometimes he'll be 10 or 12 yards back, just where he wanted to be during that play. We practiced this for 6 weeks before we ever played this game. And during scout time, during our practice, we worked on this. And we worked on it constantly so that we could watch our Mike linebacker, for example, and say, hey, every time you're in coverage, you're back. You got to mix that up, otherwise you're giving it away. And so it was constant feedback to him so that he could work through all the little details to make sure he wasn't giving away what we were doing based on his alignment. And so from our base 2-3-1, we have 7 coverages. So our base is our 2 rushers. And so that's where we're rushing to, and then we have 4 guys in coverage. And so we do that 2-3-1, 2-2-2, and 2-1-3. So our 2-3-1, we've got our Mike and our Sam. We're in short zone coverage. Our Will had deep third, and then our safety had deep 2/3, away from the twin side, just in one of their alignments. Again, it differs slightly on where their alignment was. This was their most common set. They ran this set, I think, over 70% of the time. So we based everything on that. They also ran some balance and some diamond and some other stuff very rarely. And so this was our base, our 2-3-1. And then our 2-2-2, we rush 2. We have 2 in short zone and 2 in deep coverage. And then our 2-3-1, we're rushing 2. In this particular case, notice we actually switched these 2 guys up. The reason why we did that is because our safety coming up could jump on that slant out route. And he actually gets an interception in the game. I think I put it in one of the film. The first time we played them, we didn't turn the ball over at all. And I think we only stopped them 2 or 3 times in the whole game. We had 6 or 7 turnovers the second time we played them. Their quarterback, I think, had thrown 1 or 2 interceptions the whole season. He threw 5 or 6 against us, and then they had a fumble. Because his head was spinning because we were moving our guys around all the time. Going into the game plan, based on what their video showed and all the reports that I ran, I had a sheet, and it said, okay, first in this many yards, these are the best play calls to call. And so it wasn't like during the game I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do now? All I had to do was look at my sheet, and it was attached to my belt, and I had to look at it. Also, I had 2 coaches up in the booth watching what they were doing, and they could say, man, coach, they just saw we had one deep coverage, they're going to send 2 deep the next play. And so we'd switch our coverage to 2 or 3 deep coverage the next time, and we got the best of them a lot. But all that being said, it's still not perfect. They were a great team, and they still scored 66 points on us. So that was the biggest, I think, realization to me, because I came from 11-man 8 years ago. And an 11-man defense, you try to come up with a sound defense that's going to stop everything, and that's generally your goal. I figured out the first year in 6-man, that's never going to happen. There's no such thing as a sound defense that's going to stop everything. It does not exist. I mean, the offense, in my opinion, has all the advantages because there is so much field to cover, and all they've got to do is find the weaknesses of your defense. And if you run one defense, that's not real difficult to do. And so that was a huge difference to me going from 8 years ago till now, is now we go into a game, and the goal is still, yes, but be a great defense, shut them down, all that kind of stuff. But realistically, we know all we got to do is score more than they do. And again, we give up 66 points and we still won the game. And so that's a successful game. The fact that our defense had 6 or 7 turnovers and they still scored 66 points just says a lot about the game itself. And so that's just a different mentality. And so any of you guys coming from 11-man, especially if you're pretty new to this, you've got to wrap your head around that And it took me 3 or 4 years to finally just be okay with, okay, we're going to give up 300 yards rushing. If we score 2 more points than they do, we still win the game, and that's just how, that's good enough. And so, going back, so we have our base, which is 2 rushers, and then we have our pressure defenses. And you'll see on the film that we watch later, we only actually put pressure on them 4 times in the entire game. We only rushed 3 defenders 4 times. I wish I could tell you exactly how many plays. I know the total game was over 200 plays between us and them, so you could guess probably about half of them were theirs. And so in about 100 plays, we rushed 3 4 times. And so it's not something you want to use often because it puts you at a real disadvantage, especially with a dynamic passing team where they have 3 amazing receivers. If you only have 3 guys in coverage, you're in trouble. So what's this look like? A 3-2-1. We rush both tackles and the strong linebacker, middle linebacker, and the weak linebacker, a short zone, and the safeties, everything deep. The 3-1-2 is we rush 3 again. We're bringing the safety up to short zone. Again, assuming because we're rushing 3, they got to get rid of it fast. And so the safety coming forward can break on the ball where the other 2 moving that backpedaling, they're not going to have that opportunity to necessarily break on the ball. Again, it was pretty effective. And so those are the pressure defenses. It cannot be, if we would have used that a lot, they would have smoked us. I mean, because, and I think they scored twice of the 4 times we did it anyway. And so it wasn't real effective. But it mixed it up enough that they had to wonder, what are they doing? Like, they had to question, where are they coming? Who's coming with pressure? Who's going to be in coverage? And again, it mixed up their quarterback. If you watch their film all year long, their quarterback, 90% of the time, was a one-read quarterback. He was told from the coach who he was throwing it to. And so if you took that one receiver away and you got lucky, he was in trouble. And then he had to look for something else. It, again, throws a lot of interceptions in this particular game, a lot of incomplete passes, and gave up several sacks. And again, we did better defensively when we were rushing 1 than when we were 2 or 3, just because, again, it threw him for a loop. And that brings us to our prevent defenses, which is the last set. This is our 1-2-3 and our 1-3-2. This is basically we were rushing 1 kid, and we were sending 5 back in coverage. This was our most effective defense against this team. I think 3 of the 5 or 6 interceptions we got were out of this. And we scored 2 defensive touchdowns on it. Just because we had way more guys in coverage than they had. They started holding back 2 guys to block every time. So we had 5 on 3 at that point. And then just the numbers advantage that we had was good. And fortunately, our 1 rusher was good enough to put some pressure on him. And I want to acknowledge the fact that I realize I've got a bunch of athletes. I mean, just like Jeremy said, you know, I've been to clinics like this for 8 years now, and there's a lot of times where I see guys running all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, if I had 6 studs like that, I could run anything I wanted to too. And I realize that. And I'm not saying this is the perfect defense for everybody. However, I think you can accomplish it with lesser athletes just by getting the key kids in the right place and practicing it enough to let them know. Because we did not have our best 6 athletes on the field all the time when we did this. Like I said, we ran 15 or 16 guys, rotating them in. We got them good enough at one position that they were comfortable. Matter of fact, we had some kids that would only come in if I knew I was going to run a base or a pressure defense. That's the only time they got in. And if the coach was smart enough to figure that out in the course of that game, good for him. Okay? We had other guys that would only come in prevent defense. Matter of fact, our spread back or quarterback, he only came in prevent defenses. Because he's a dang good cover kid, and I didn't want to risk him getting hurt, blitzing him or playing short or putting it because he wasn't very big. And so we took chances with them not being able to figure out our game plan by having those substitutions in place so that we keep kids fresh. And it was effective. I mean, at the beginning of the game, we went into halftime down by 20, and then we ended up winning the game by 10 because they played 7 and we played 16. And so we are willing to take lesser athletes on the field in different positions that are good enough to keep our kids in good enough shape so that they can compete for the whole 4 quarters. And that same plan was really effective against Heritage. Same thing. We went down by 16 early in the 3rd quarter, and because we were rotating guys in the whole game, they didn't score again the rest of the game. We ended up winning that game as well. And it's just, honestly, and my coaches may argue this point, I think both those teams had better athletes than us. I think their top 6 or 7 were better than our top 6 or 7. I think our 7 through 16 were way better than anything they had after that. And therefore, both of those teams didn't play any of their subs. And they had more kids on the sidelines than we did. And yet, our kids stayed fresh, and it helped us win the game. Yes, sir?
You might have a question. We're starting first year with the high school. When you don't have any athletes, no skills, no skill positions, nobody that not just players. What would be the better defense to compensate for the lack of athletic skills or speed?
It all depends on who you're playing. I mean, like I said, this defense, the base 2-3-1 defense is great against a spread team. If you're going against a Jaybird team, it's not fantastic because you only have 2 guys on the line and you're going to get blown off with them having 4 blockers. And so any defense in 6-man football, it's a week-by-week decision. What I did when we first started our first year, we actually ran a base 4-2, and I think we only scheduled tight teams, and so it was fairly effective. But I mean, we didn't win a game. So I mean, but we had that year we didn't have a bunch of speed either. We had bigger kids. They were weak, so it still wasn't real effective. But that's kind of what we did. It depends. Like if your athletes are fast, then you want to spread them out and get them space and make a bigger team chase you. If your kids are big, you want to try to get those kids in a position to make a play. But then if the other team spreads you out, you're in trouble as well. So, I mean, it all depends on who you're playing and what their situation is. And that's 6-man football. I mean, offensively, you can pretty much go into most game plans saying, this is our offense, this is what we're kind of going to do. Defensively, it's every week is different. I mean, every week is different. You can't really use one game plan for another. And we try to do that some just to help us plan, but it's just not that effective.
I would say also, during our chalk talk time, there's a lot of folks who'd be willing to sit down and X and O with you and help answer that question.
And so then our 1-3-2, we rush 1, and then we put 5 back in coverage, 3 short, 2 deep. And then our 1-2-3, we rush 1. In this case, we rushed our strong linebacker just because it gave him a strategic advantage. And he actually gets 3 sacks, I think, in this game from this position coming in. Again, it's one of our best athletes, so know that when you watch film. But that's who we were rushing in that one, and we put both of our tackles in coverage. Again, neither one of our tackles were cover guys. But repping it enough and practicing it enough, they could do it good enough to be effective. Coach, you want to watch the film? I think I have, 10 minutes?
Yes, sir.
So I made playlists for each one of these defenses just to kind of show you. Well, I'm going to be in one of the chalk talks later, so if you want to see more of this film, you can come look then, because I don't know how much we're going to get through.
Go to the 1, 2, 3 first.
Yeah, that's fine.
Y'all are in blue.
We're in blue, they're in white. So our middle linebacker screwed up on that play. He's supposed to rush right away, and he hesitated, and so it didn't put any pressure on him.
playing man or zone?
We're in zone all the time now. We knew if number 8 got the ball running downhill, he was never going to pass the ball, and so everybody collapsed on it. And that was true every time. He never stopped and threw it. If he got it and went backwards, he was throwing it every time. Instead, that was just a read, and we knew we could send 6 if he was running downhill. And so it looks like we're not covering anything, but that was a game time decision. And there's a perfect example of, even if you have a good call, of an athlete's going to make a play. And that, their 2 receivers were just studs. I mean, we had great coverage. We had the perfect coverage Eaton called, and he just caught it over him, and then we missed the tackle. You want to go to the next defense, coach, so that we can get more. That was just missed coverage. Well, I want to show them everything. I mean, you can call the right defense, and it doesn't matter if they find the hole in the defense. It's still, and like that. That's just a broken play. I mean, it's true. Like no defense you call could stop that. I mean, and again, that was another one of those situations where we knew number 8 was running because he was going downhill. I'm hoping it shows him pass the ball later, because you can see what I mean, where he just doesn't go forward at all. And the entire season it was that way on film. And so we knew, oh, everybody good. We're not. And if he ever did stop and throw it, it was going to be a touchdown. We were giving that up every time.
But you can actually rewind it from there to what it looks like.
Oh, yes.
The previous play, it starts after the play.
That's all right. Want to go to the next defense, coach? Sure. There's a slant out that they run all the time.
Is this the 2-1-3 where you have 2 going in, 1 middle?
That's right. So we have 2 rushers, 1 in the middle, and all 3 covering deep. I mean, we used this in situations where they knew they were going deep. 2nd and 15, first off, they passed 98% of the time, and most of the time that was a deep pass on 2nd and 15. And so we knew that, and so we left 3 deep coverage. And again, if anybody has Huddle, if you want to send me a share request, I'll share all these playlists with you, because I don't care. I'll give anybody our film. It doesn't matter to me. I trade our film to everybody. I collect film all year long. So, oh, you want to go to the pressure defenses, coach? So skip the next 2 and just go down to the 3-1-2. This one was just 1 play. So this is a short yardage situation. He should have made that play, but didn't. I go to the next play, the foul will only have one play anyway. Anyway, that's good, Coach. Are there any questions? We have like 30 minutes. Yes, sir.
Do you have, players that play defense, there's a lot for kids to learn, and remember, as far as assignments and stuff? Did you have players that played on defense and offense, or did you have players?
Almost all of our players played both ways. We had two, I think, that played one way or the other. We had one really offensive guy and one really defensive guy, but everybody else played both ways. Again, this game plan, and I mean, you can watch this whole film. The defensive game plan, it was really effective, and it worked really well. I mean, like I said, we gave them 66 points, but even on a lot of their touchdowns, we had guys in the right spots. We spent 6 weeks on this. Right? We broke down every game that they played. We sent kids playlists, and we're like, look at this. Look what they do on third down. I mean, I broke it down, first down, second down, third down, fourth down, by yardage, and I shared the playlist with our guys and said, think about what you're going to do in this situation. These are the defenses that I'm going to call. And so they studied film. Now, we were fortunate. I mean, we were a really good team, and so we played some teams that weren't near as talented, and so we could sacrifice a lot of game prep for those weeks to prep plan for them. I mean, if we would have had a really tough schedule all the way through, it would have been much more difficult. And so and this is going to sound prideful, and I apologize in advance, but we knew going into the season we were going to be really good. We thought we were going to struggle with Waco Vanguard, we were going to struggle with Emory, and then either Heritage, Watauga, or Midland Trinity. And so every single one of those teams, I collected game film all year, and we had a game plan for every one of them, and we broke down all their film, and we started prep. We didn't look past Emory at all. Once we knew we were seeing them in the second round, we just put everything else on the back burner. As a coaching staff, we still met and got ready and planned all of those just in case we needed them. But that was from the beginning. From week 1 or 2, we kind of knew that's where we were as a program. I mean, we won state the year before. We lost 2 players, and so we were coming back in a really good position. And so we could actually look way ahead. I mean, which some coaches will tell you is crazy. You look 1 week at a time, and in general, I can't argue with that. But we broke that rule. Yes, sir.
So even though you're playing zones on the outsides, you still have enough height on the receiver?
Yeah. We thought our kids were faster than theirs, and they were. I mean, they were taller and more physical. Our kids were faster. I mean, you saw even when they beat us deep, our guys were right there. I mean, it's just they didn't make the play. And a lot of times the guys that were up tight weren't actually the deep zone. A lot of times it was the safety of the middle linebacker that were actually dropping back. But yeah, and sometimes we had them playing up tight until right before the snap of the ball, and then they would back off. And we knew what their cadence was. I mean, again, they started their cadence, looked over at the coach, and then they're snapping the ball. So once they looked over at the coach, we got where we belong. And it was all watching film and prep for that game. So, any other questions I'll answer during the Chalk Talk. I'm out of time. So thanks, Coach.
Oh, we'll have no
a short break, and we'll then reconvene here in about 10 or 15 minutes. So if y'all want to go to the restroom or get you a drink, then we'll be back in just a few.